we're talking about create a living from a record label. What does it take to build a successful record label? And Sebi and Dom are giving us useful insights from their many years of practical experience in building and working for various record labels. And yeah, Sebastian Wolters, MAXIMONO, and Dominic Kerley from Lable Worx. Thank you for being here at the Berlin Dance Music event.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, I think we start with a little instruction, with a little background of yourself, and yeah, you can start.
Hi. My name's Dominic, and I work for Lable Worx, and I'm the VP of artist labels and content. So I oversee everything from label management to promoting releases at the stores like Spotify and Beatport, etc. And yeah. We have a range of label services for artist royalty statements, demo management, just everything you need to run an independent record label, essentially.
Yeah, my name is Sebi. I'm a music producer and label owner. I'm one of the founders of the St. Bristol. And yeah, we've been working with Lable Worx for a couple of years now. It's getting even closer now. We will come to that a bit later, I guess. Yeah, I've been making music since like the late 90s. Started with jungle and breakbeat and drum and bass, and got into house music around 2012, 13. And yeah, just started doing stuff, and we founded the St. Bristol in 2014, and yeah, it's quite a long way until today. So we've made a lot of experiences, not as many as Dom through his Lable Worx thing, but I think yeah, we could give a few like advices what's good, or like stuff that you want to avoid when you're like starting a label, and at the same time just motivating people to just give it a try, because that's the most important thing for me. Is there's lots of like theoretical stuff that you need to know and you need to take care of, but at the end of the day you just want to start somewhere. And that's, I think, like don't mind what we're talking about today. Like if you feel it's the right time to just try it, there's always a starting point where you have no idea where this is gonna end or this is gonna lead you. So, but there's a couple of things on the road that you should keep in mind, and I think we're gonna talk about that today. And yeah, if you feel like there's questions coming up, just raise your hands and we'll answer them, hopefully.
Yeah. And yeah, our topic is record labels and how to start, and what is like the basic knowledge when you're starting a record label. In my case, I created a record label, I started a record label, so it's also interested for me to start this conversation with you. What is your advice for upcoming managers like to start a label, and what is the basic knowledge for that?
Sure. I mean, when it comes to setting up a record label, always have a vision for your label, you know, a sound, you know, even some like artistic direction on sort of how you want it to look on social media, how you want people to see it from the outside. So they're the things that we look for when people sign up with us. We're looking at, you know, their social media presence, how much music they've got ready. You know, ultimately the music's the most important part. So yeah, just make sure you've got all that in order before you sign up, or before you look to do that. And then just network, speak to as many artists as you can, speak to other record labels, you know. Forming alliances with artists and other labels is a really good way to help build your brand, you know. Like last night we did the event, and it was like, we have, you know, your label in Bristol, and, you know, little things like that go a long way, just to sort of tap into other people's brands and audiences.
Yeah, and just dive into this point. Do you need to think about every step before you start a record label? Because in my person, I just do something and learn about my faults. But is it better to think about every opportunities I have and everything I have to know about record labels to start all over, or?
No, I don't think so. I mean, obviously the more you know up front, it helps, but a lot of these things you learn on the go, you know. I mean, you've got the passion, that's always the most important thing. You've got a passion to start a label and sign music, or you're making your own music and you just want to have your own outlet to release your own music, then You know, that's where services like Lable Worx help. You know, we're there to help you and, you know, answer any questions and help you run a label. So
yeah, and this is at the beginning when you're starting. In my case, we started with tech house or bass house. Is it really important to know, okay, I'm in this genre, but my artistic side will change in the next years. So, is it possible to create a storytelling, or do you need a storytelling for your label to communicate with the audience out there? Just to have, okay, we have a strict genre, we have a strict style, but in case of styles of your own taste, and their record label style can change. Is this something you need in mind and you keep in mind when you're starting a label?
Maybe I can answer, or try to answer that. I think there's no right or wrong on this question. When we started this in Bristol, it was created from a live event, that's where it came from, and because I was running a drum and bass label back in 2005 or something, so I kind of knew like a few rough things that you need to keep in mind, like you need to have a distributor to get to all the shops and the streaming services and stuff like that. But at the same time, for us, it was just, we created that vision, like Dom said, of having like good vibes house. That was the vision for the St. Bristol. We didn't stick to like any specific house genre. We put out like 2 free compilations to start the label with. Like the first 2 releases were completely free, like free download releases, just to build like an audience and to build a fan base. And there was like a little bit of everything. There was bass house and classic house and tech house. And then like after a while, then you see like where the market pick up your sound, where they pick up your sound. And for us, it went off in America. We didn't plan this, or it just happened. And the people there, they are expecting a certain sound so that it works on the festivals and in the clubs. And then you start like sharpening your profile after a while. So I wouldn't say you really need like a really tight sound to begin with, but you need like an idea where you want to go, and then just go with the flow.
Yeah, and I think there's also great tools outside, like SoundCloud. You can start a record label for free, building like a design and copyright design and uploading tracks, as you said, like free downloads, just to get feedback from the audience, like in which direction I can build up a record label. And then you can collect data and see, okay, this is something I would like to do, this is my way to go. And you have also like a toolbox, what you need when you start a record label, which are the main things you need, like tools or services.
I mean, well, obviously a distributor is a good start because you make sure you're getting on the right DSPs. I think when you're choosing a distributor, it's like we as Lable Worx, we specialise in dance electronic music, so that's kind of like our niche. So if whoever you're working with, you need to make sure that they know how to cater for your style of music and which stores to be delivering that to. And then like all the add-on services that are there, like accounting to your artists for statements and things, they're becoming more and more important. You know, years ago, unfortunately, in the music industry, it's always been a bit of a thing where it seems acceptable not to account to artists or not to pay artists, but that's obviously since the pandemic has massively changed. And so I think if you're starting a new label now, it's making sure you have those things in order from the beginning. And it really shows, like we see with labels who do account regular, the artists will want to continue working with that label. They'll send them more demos, because they go, even if they're not owed any money, but they get a statement and they can see, oh, they've gotten this many streams, this many downloads. It's just full transparency. Just those little things, it does make a difference, and it will help your label accelerate a lot faster.
Okay, so you have like the distributor, and which other tools do you need, or services? Like you need social media, also SoundCloud. And do you have also something you need to know? Also, for me, it's like hard at the beginning. Do I need a contract or something like this, like the paperwork? Is this something you need to know? Where can I get this knowledge about something like this? dry work.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, contracts, absolutely. You know, make sure you do have contracts with artists. We've seen it so many times where, you know, they've just signed tracks from being sent a demo, and it's sort of been an email agreement, and 5-10 years down the line, that artist may have become a superstar, and then they'll start coming back and saying, you don't have the rights for this music, you need to take it down. And unfortunately, if you don't have that paperwork in place, yeah, they'll take it down. So, yeah, contracts, 100%, get those sorted for your artists. Other things I think is important when you're launching is it can be expensive, but like looking for the right type of PR and promotion just to get things going. I mean, in your case with This Ain't Bristol, they had the events, and again, that's a great launch pad. If you have an event to then launch into a label, that's a great tool to have behind you, because you've already started to build an audience to work with. And YouTube channels, we're seeing that more, where people have just started a YouTube channel as just more for fun, just reposting music, creating playlists, and then that's grown. And then eventually that's then become a record. They've turned it into record labels, and they're now some of our biggest record labels started off just as like a YouTube channel or a SoundCloud channel that was purely just for fun, where they were just reposting music and sharing music that they liked. Yeah.
So we have like the toolbox for everyone they start a label. So, but we have a perfect example with This in Bristol. Would you like to talk about like the success story about This in Bristol? To give a little insight on the factors and turning points.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's obviously turning points as well, but it's a long story. I'm trying to keep it as short as possible. Yeah, as you guys said, we started it from a live event back in our hometown in Hanover. And it was just that's just one additional thing I would add to you guys. Having the right team or the right crew to start a label is pretty important, because it's just if you want to do it seriously, it's just too much work to have it on your own shoulders, just on your shoulders. That's just too much. You can't be a designer, a social media manager, or whatever, like handling the contracts, the accounting and everything. I mean, you can try, but it's not gonna get big. So we were a crew of like 5 or 6 people when the event started, with a very broad like mixture of people. Like we had one guy that was like really good at social media and stuff, and he was running the events as well. And then there was me for the music side with Billy from the UK, who came over, who moved to Hanover because of the event. And when we sat together and we were like chilling and speaking about visions and stuff, then we had the idea of let's just try and turn it into a record label, because we knew the basics through my drum and bass times, how to like set it up, but it's essential to have a good crew. Like you guys are doing pretty much the same with the Freaks label, because you've got your photographers and your video teams, and it's very helpful to have that like kind of team. And it started from there. So we did a couple more events before we started the label, and they grew. Like the first event was like 50, 100 visitors or something, and it grew to like the maximum capacity we had in the club, which was like I think 1,300 or something. So there was like a small fan base, and then as I said, we put together these 2 free compilations with like even not really thinking about which artists to put on. Like there wasn't any major strategy involved. So we just put on music that we felt worked as the claim good vibes house music. Some of us had we all had the background in like broken beat drum and bass, so it was like a little bit on that like direction, if you want to call it that. But yeah, so that's where it started, and the 2 compilations worked we had really like a lot of downloads on these things. And then we took it to a distributor from Hamburg and had the first talks, and yeah, just released music through there was streaming already, but it was really small in 2014, 2015. It was more about Beatport and Juno Download and all these shops to get on there, and it kind of picked up from there. And as I said, we don't know why, but like in America, it was really well received, and the people loved the sound. I think it was something new for them as well, because they got bored of all the EDM stuff they were seeing at the festivals. So it was something new for them. It was pretty much at the same time Dirty Bird like became big. So I don't know how it happened, but they saw us as like the second Dirty Bird in the US, which was cool for us. We were sitting in Hanover in our small office thinking like, how did that happen? But that's how it is sometimes. And then, yeah, we like concentrated on that market a bit more because, I mean, we will come into income streams a bit later, like what is helpful to build like a bigger label or create a living from your label. That's another story. But yeah, that's how it started, I would say. And yeah, up until now, and we were speaking about turning points. I think that's one like important part. As soon as your label is growing, there will be a point where you have to think about like how much focus do I put on the artistic side, on the arts, and how much is like commercial things to like pay all your people and stuff. And that's where we were coming to a point where all the there were 4 founders of the label left, like 4 co-founders, and all of us were having like full-time jobs besides running a label, and then there was this point where we had to decide like quitting our full-time jobs and doing the label or like continuing with the jobs, and obviously that's an important one, and yeah, like for myself, I couldn't quit my job because it was my own company. I'm running a software company. So I couldn't just quit it because I had like 20 people working for the company, but the other people as well. So we started talking to like bigger brands or companies, like to think if they could like take over the label from this point and like keep growing, because like with a certain size of your label, the expectations get bigger from like all sides, from artists, from promoters, from PR agencies that are working for you or whatever. So yeah, you have a certain responsibility as well for your artists. And we said like, there's a point where we can't continue to do that, and that's where we handed it over to Lable Worx and to Wes from Defected last year, to take it to another level, because there's like these 2 ways you can go. You can keep it like underground and really small, or just stop doing it. That's another option. But we decided like, we've put so much heart and time into that baby, into that thing, that it would have been a shame to just let it go. So we were really happy that these guys, because they've got all the infrastructure that the label needs to like keep growing. And yeah, obviously I'm still involved, like working with the guys, helping them signing music and continuing like the musical journey for the label. But all the other stuff has been taken care of, and that's a great point to go into the future.
Yeah. And what you said, really good thing is, or what the result of like building a record label, bringing your arts to the market is like you creating a brand, you creating a movement with this brand. So what are the key factors like to creating like a movement?
That's a tough one. I don't think there's like a formula to like. I mean, if there was, there would be like hundreds of people trying to do that. You have to be at the right place at the right time, I think, with the right sound, obviously. And then, of course, like the American market, that helped a lot, because they've got like a different approach to like following brands, because it's all like coming from the college structures, and they really show what they love. Like they're wearing all the shirts, so you can concentrate on merchandise as well. That's stuff that didn't really work in Europe. So it helped that it picked off in America. And then like the other parts of the world will recognize that there's something growing, and they will jump on it as well. So I wouldn't say there's like a formula to create a movement. But when you like, that's one of the initial points that you both mentioned, starting it from an event, you've got like an emotional connection to something. And that's really tough doing that without an event or something else, like a YouTube channel or whatever. Just building it from nowhere is pretty hard, because all the social media channels and everything is becoming pretty, I don't know, anonymous at the same time. I mean, it's getting more and more transparent, but also anonymous. So it's hard to create emotional connection to something. And you got to do it through something live, or through like your audience on a YouTube channel or whatever.
Yeah. Creating a label is it's really an emotional thing, because it's your art, and you put it in like a brand and put it out. And what's in my opinion, it's really great to have a connection to the artists. Not like we're building a record label in 2017, and now we have like a really hard turning points. We started with artworks and logos, and now we at this point, like 2 years later, we have our signature logo, our signature design, and yeah, we now building this movement. We have artists, we are connected with artists in Germany, and this is like what's really important for us, to have like connection to artists, like to have connections to other cities, to other clubs, to make their like label showcases there, or bring them to your city, bring them to your residency club, to have to build this connection to every artist, to have like, yeah, grow a family. And this is like really important, and to get to know your artist. And I think when you're signing tracks from artists you never see before, it's like this is another vibe. And I think when you creating a brand, when you're creating a movement, you need to have a team. And the best thing is all of them are artists, and so we can have like a team, all of artists, and can do parties together, and yeah, go the same way with everything you have. So yeah, you mentioned it, like there are two things. You have like the art side of labeling and the commercialization of labeling. What is there the difference? And yeah, is it important to choose one side, and is both the same? What is your opinion about that?
I mean, just to go back a bit as well. One thing I would say, whatever you do with your label, is we say to so many labels is stick with what you're passionate about, because sometimes it doesn't click straight away. You know, like we see labels that'll be with us for 2-3 years, and it won't be till like the 4th or 5th year where all of a sudden something clicks, and then the sound takes off, or the label just gets on the right trajectory. So definitely just be passionate about what you're releasing, and if you believe in it, just stick with it, because it does take a while to build that momentum. In terms of the art and the commercialization side, I mean, it's kind of your preference really, like what you want to get out of a label. Is it purely about the music, or are you trying to, you know, essentially make money out of it? Because they're two very different things, and you know, we see it time and time again where most labels do it out of passion initially, and I think that's always the right way to start a label. It should be purely passionate about the music you're signing. The commercialization sometimes happens by mistake, like it's not thought about, it's just a record takes off, or like with you guys with America, where it just all started to take off, and then you was able to merchandise that as well. I don't really think setting up a label with the outset of going, I want to make money out of this, is not the right direction. I just think that needs to happen more organically, and then when that does happen, it's then just, you know, see how you can make the most out of that, because there's so many different ways to make money out of a label these days. But, you know, but sadly the music side of it's generally the bit that doesn't generate the most amount of revenue. It's going beyond that with the events, merchandise, and you know, syncs and things like that. So it's just yeah.
But there's a totally difference between all the genres as well. So I think when you start a house label, it's totally different to start a techno label or like an underground techno label. Do you have experience like a distributor? You know record labels, you know the insights.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, 100%. You know, if you launch like a breakbeat label, you know, it's quite a small scene, so you tend to know, unless like you get a track that just blows up on the radio, it's quite a very small market you're appealing to. Whereas house, you know, the more EDM commercial sound, obviously, yeah, you're doing. If you get that right quicker, you know, especially on the streaming side of things, you can do quite well out of that quite quickly. But you are competing in a much bigger market. That's the other difference. So when you go into like house EDM style stuff, it's a huge marketplace, and so you're fighting with a lot more people. Techno is a big genre as well, but there's a lot of, there's obviously a lot of different side genres of techno as well, and you know, again, when you're competing with a drum code who are like sort of at the top level of that side of techno, but then that's why you've probably seen on Beatport now, there's more and more subgenres of techno appearing, like because they're doing this to open up that space for other labels to have an opportunity to chart and get exposure. So yeah, all the genres are very, very different, to be honest.
Yeah. And are you able at Lable Worx to give an advice to label manager, like when they ask you, hey, what should I do? I would like to create a techno label, for example. And they ask you, I wrote Lable Worx, hey, can you help me to, what is the next point? What is my next steps? Are you able to give them advices like for the genres and?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's something we do quite a lot. So if you come to us with, obviously normally you need to have some sort of an idea, you know, like I want to release techno, and generally you'll have some music. And then the questions we get is, how can we, you know, what can we do for this? So things like, you know, we obviously do all of the pitch into the stores to try and get you banners and placements, playlist spots on the streaming stores. But then we can go beyond that. So we'll sometimes help and link up artists. So maybe try and, like if you're a new label, traditionally, especially on Beatport, it was quite good to try and get a remix from a bigger artist, because that would then help all of a sudden to put your label in their fans' light as well. So getting remixes from bigger artists is always it's a good thing. Obviously, you sometimes have to pay for that, depending on the artist you're working with, but it can be a very good investment. Yeah, other things to do with that as well is, yeah, no, I think that's probably it for the first part. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have to say that at this point, because that's where we started to work with you guys. That's something they really do. They're just not saying that they are helping, but they really do help. In the beginning, I thought it was like, because Lable Worx was quite young when we started working with you, I guess. And I thought that maybe they are still pretty small, so they have got the resources to like help you and like get into like personal contact, but they really do until today. Even with like, I don't know how many labels you've got on your system, but it's still a very personal contact, and they help you on very specific things, like beyond normal like working times and everything. So that's something where for us, like Lable Worx really stood out, and that's why we're still working with them. Because I know it's sometimes it's shitty to say that from your end, like advertising your own company, but it really helps, and there's, even for younger labels, that's essential, I would say, to have some sort of guide, and even if it comes to contracts, because I know like when you're standing in front of that part of your business, that could be really scary, like thinking about like 20 pages contracts, and you think like, oh, gotta get a lawyer on board or whatever, and that's gonna be really expensive, and they can help you as well, because there are so many contracts out there, so you can just grab it from different directions and build your own set of contracts. And you've got stuff in your system already that you can use as well. So that's, yeah, it helps a lot.
Yeah. And yeah, what's next when we have our brand? We contact with Lable Worx, for example, with a distributor. And yeah, what's the next step? So who is the person who can help me with finding right artists, finding the right words to write a contract and stuff like this? Is also who's the person to help me with that? So I'm like, when I start, I'm totally like an amateur, so I don't know nothing about the industry. And so what is your advice? So to get this knowledge, to have everything packed.
I think you said it earlier. It's like building those personal connections to people. If it's possible through events, that's a lot easier. When you go go to your artist dinners before the shows or whatever, that's always a good spot to like get to know people and learn from them. But yeah, it's one of the main things, like building contacts, and that's also why I said it's important to have like a diverse team where people are really strong in connecting. Because from my end, I'm an awful like small talk guy. I can't really small talk. So if you put me in a room with like people I haven't seen before, I wouldn't say a word, probably. But we had one guy in our team, Bensky. He's the socializer. He gets on with everyone after like a minute, and that really helped like building connections to people that we book to our events as well. So yeah, you can't really have all these strengths in you, so you have to like have someone for every like part of the thing, which doesn't mean you need like a 10 people team to start with, but at least 2 or 3 people I would say is a good size to start with a crew.
And is it useful to have everything internal, or are there some tasks to outsource? So is it better to outsource something like is there something you?
I mean, yeah. I mean, if you can outsource certain things, you know, especially if that's maybe not to your skill set. So there's a lot of label management services out there. We've got one as well where we can basically handle all the administration side of the label. So basically all the boring stuff, really, like, you know, sending contracts to the artist, sending the statements, so we can help with that or advise with that. But those things. But at the same time, we always try to educate our labels, so we always try and teach them first and show them the way to do it. And because a lot of this stuff, it seems quite complicated and overwhelming when you first start, but actually a lot of it's quite simple when you get into the motions of it. And as long as you've got a few people in your team to help share that workload, it is more than capable to do it. But then when you sort of grow and expand and things start to get out of control and you need that extra support, there is services out there that you can then pay for that additional support. But I'm a big believer in that's how I've always done things. I've tried to learn everything myself first, and then, you know, then you can like delegate or pass on. But I think it's good to, as running a label, understand all the areas of the label, because ultimately the artists that you sign, they will come to you to ask questions. So it's good for you to just understand every area of the business to some level.
And from a technical side, I mean, there's no way around working with external services, even if it comes to like Dropbox or sharing services like teamwork stuff like Slack or whatever. So you've come to a point where you need to get those things involved, and then you can't really get around working with external companies. And also when it comes to the other income stuff like publishing and neighboring rights and all that kind of stuff, I mean, the more you get under one roof, like on the Lable Worx side, that's really helpful, because yeah, then you don't have to like get in touch with like 8 different companies and like get into contracts with them, and it has to like work economically as well. So if you're not selling any records or downloads or streams, you can't really get too many external things that are expensive to pay.
Yeah, and now we have like our label, and how can we create a living from that? How can we create earnings from a label now? I think, and I can say it in my position, we have parties, we earn money with parties and events and like merchandise, but I think the label thing is quite harder to learn, quite harder to get into this business.
I mean, like I said earlier, unfortunately, the actual music side is often the side that doesn't generate the most amount of revenue, you know, for a label. It often comes from external things, with events, merchandise, and neighbouring rights is a huge thing at the moment. So that's basically, neighbouring rights is when you get like radio play, you know, festival plays where your music's played. That's a huge revenue stream, and it's kind of something that record labels don't realise. Actually, they're 50% of neighbouring rights goes to a record label, so it's additional revenue, and the other 50% goes to the performer. It's such an untapped revenue stream that a lot of people don't know about. Publishing is another source, but publishing still can seem quite complicated, but there's great platforms out there that can help with that. And obviously when you get into the publishing side, you then get into syncs, you know, whether you sync a track to a TV show or to like a Netflix or something, and that's when you can really like see some good revenue coming in. But obviously it's hard, you know, when you're pitching for syncs, there's, you know, thousands of people pitching records at the same time, so it's very, very difficult to do it. But if it does work, you know, that's where you see the most revenue. And then in terms of music long term for your label, it's about building a very strong catalogue. So I mean, Vincent Bristol have been going for so many years now, and they've, you know, once you've got 2, 3, 4 years worth of music, that's strong quality music. Especially with streaming now, you just kind of see this residual income every month, and that's just through your back catalogue. And then if you know, every now and then, if you just keep building on that, you'll all of a sudden just see you're earning money every month from your back catalogue alone. And then you can then look and go, oh, that track seems to be doing really well. Maybe we should do a new version or a remix of that older track. And it's about recycling that music and getting it out to new people, because there is so much music being released every single week. It's hard to stand out, and sometimes music, really good music, just gets missed. And you have to kind of re-showcase that. And like we often say, like doing sort of like mini samplers or mini compilations is a good way just to resurface music that was maybe released, you know, 4 or 5 years ago, and bringing it back to the table. But yeah, having a very strong catalogue of music is I think that's the essence. I mean, you look at labels like Defected, they're going back 25 years, and you just look and they've had these moments where they've had records that have just, you know, broken into the mainstream, and they're still streaming. But obviously when you have those big records, your whole catalogue has a big revival as well, because people start to then look at your label and go, oh, what else have they got? And we see that time and time again. So yeah, just releasing consistently strong music is a good thing.
Yeah, patience is key. I would totally agree. Like, even if you see, I've just read that yesterday, I think, Hospital Records, the big drum and bass label, they are on for like also 20 years probably, and they now got like their stuff synced to a big like game, racing game. Like they have a whole radio station within that game. And that's where it starts to get interesting, but it took them like 20 years. I mean, they became bigger like earlier, but that's where you see you gotta have that patience. And maybe in the first, as you said, the first 2 or 3 years, nothing's really happening or clicking. If you keep believing in what you do, that could work. And at the same time, I would say a mixture of like signing a lot of records from other people that you believe in, but also pick like 1 or 2 artists that are quite unknown and you really believe in, and build them from your end. Because if you break those artists, that's where the fun begins. Because if you manage to break them, that's like a lot of probably like good income for your label as well. If you take care of all the income streams, like publishing and maybe even artist management for those like small artists that could need help on the management side. I know like a couple of years ago there was this buzzword in the music scene, 360-degree label management, but that's still a thing. You don't really say that word anymore, but it's like having that view on merchandise, artist management, publishing. There's so many things to keep in mind. But yeah, having like 1 or 2 key artists that only release on your label, I mean, I wouldn't say full exclusive, but like mainly on your label, that helps a lot as well.
Yeah, and what is where come the earnings from? Like, do you have the neighboring rights, we have the publishing, and the sales? Is it right, or is there something else where you can earn money with a record label?
They're your main sources in terms of, you know, from the actual masters of the records, yeah. So it's the neighbouring, the publishing, and sale, like, you know, downloads and streams, and then, you know, syncs
and merchandise, like depending on which market you're strong in. As I said, with America, it was pretty easy to like, we shipped like 95% of our shop orders to the US, or like South America as well. Because yeah, for some markets that works as well. Like if you look at Dirty Bird, for example, their shop is huge. Like when they do their festivals, I don't know how like the revenue is shared, but I would say it's 50-50 between like ticket sales and merchandise sales on the festival. It's crazy.
Okay. And I think when you start a record label, you sell your tracks, and neighboring rights and publishing is something like you not think about at the beginning. So you have like the sales report, and when was the time, when was the point with this in Bristol you thought about, okay, what is neighboring rights and publishing?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, it took a couple of years, to be honest. It was like after probably 4 years, 5 years. And it was mainly, I was touring in Australia and had a chat with someone who was running a label in Australia. And he told me like how it worked for them. And him and his artist made 50% of their income just through neighboring rights, which is crazy. But it was mainly because they've got a pretty smart like technologies like which recognize like these recognition boxes in the clubs that really like deliver which tracks are being played that night, which is still, we're far away from that in Europe or like wherever. But in Australia, that was really strong. And when they recognize that your music is actually being played in the clubs in front of whatever, 500 to 20,000 people, that's where the income streams are, or like the neighboring rights are coming in as well. It's actually mind-blowing when you hear how much money you could get if someone plays on a big festival of like 50,000 people and just plays one of your tracks and it gets recognized. That's a lot of money. I don't know the numbers exactly, but it's a couple of grands actually.
Yeah, it varies from which territory, from territory to territory. But yeah, it's Australia actually pay out one of the highest. And I know some Australian labels, because they do 2 payouts a year, and one of them's before Christmas, and they always go, that's kind of like their Christmas bonus. It's like they get the neighbouring rights check just before Christmas. But yeah, it's the thing is, again, stuff like that, that's where, again, you can speak to your distributor, whoever you're working with, and they can advise on this as well. Because like we've got a completely separate division that handles neighbouring rights, but we don't handle publishing, but we've got ties with publishing companies where we can advise, and most distributors will have that sort of advice to give you out to say, we'd recommend these people or these people. But when it comes to you as a record label, those things, it's good to try to think about it from the beginning these days, because that's obviously years ago these things weren't really that common, but the knowledge is there now, and there's the resources there to learn about it. So if you can make sure those things are built into your artist contract when you're signing the tracks, then you're covered, because publishing is often the hardest to sign publishing, and whereas the neighbouring rights side is very different. But yeah, you need to sort of speak to someone about the artist contract side of that, really, just to understand that and make sure what you're signing with those artists when you first sign them, everything's done correctly, because otherwise it can come back to sort of bite you in the arse in the future if you've not done things properly, and then you can't then claim it properly.
Could you explain neighboring rights? What are these neighboring rights, and how can I collect them? What's the services, and can I ask you for advisation? Yeah.
So I would say it's if you get plays at a festival, radio plays. So, if you was played on Radio 1, or Sirius rotation in America. All those, that's where you get your neighbouring rights from. So we've got, it's our sister company, it's called Lable Worx, and that specialises in neighbouring rights collection. The difference between, the main thing you want to look at when you're looking at whether you go with an agency or society is their relationships with those societies and the technology, because like publishing and neighbouring rights, it's still very old school in the way they handle things. So there's a lot of manual entry, and I mean, some societies you still have to send like paperwork documents. You can't send, via email. It's quite difficult. So you want to make sure you're working with a company that can handle all that for you, because it is a lot of admin work if it's not done properly. And I mean, we've had cases where we've found tracks that have done really well, but then we've then found like hundreds of thousands like unclaimed, because you can go back. In some territories, you can go back forever and claim music. Some countries, you've got a year. So if you don't claim it within that 1 year, it's gone. You've lost that money. So that's the thing. Like if you have that record that takes off 1 year, that's why you want to make sure you've got those things in place now, because there is a bit of a timeline on some things.
Is that different to performing rights?
No, that is your performing rights. Yeah. So
neighbouring rights and performing rights are the same.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So it's your performance rights. So that's as you as a performer. You collect that share, but also there's 50% that goes to a record label as well. So if you ran your own record label, you could collect it on half of the label and yourself as well. So it's basically with the societies, you have to sign up to two like assets. You have to sign up as a performer and a label.
So the PROs collect those.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. Yeah.
So you need 3 services to collect the publishing, neighboring rights, and the sales. Is it right?
Yeah, because ideally you want to work with people that specialise in those services. So hence why we specialise in distribution. Lable specialises in neighbouring rights, and then you know, the Sev's like Centric and is it Roba? There's another good publisher, and they specialise in publishing. So yeah, I would always recommend working with specialists in different areas because you're going to get the best out of people.
And as Dom said, it sounds more complicated than it actually is. Like if you've got those experts to help you, because at the end of the day, it's like a couple of days work for you to sort it out. It's like you've got to sign a contract with the company, and then they will send you all the documents you have to fill out with all the music stuff, upload your music, and after a couple of days, it's done. And the only thing you will then have to do is like get the statements from the companies and claim the money.
Collect the money. Yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes it is that, like, how do you say, the first step is it seems pretty big, but once you've done that, it's that easy.
Yeah, the setup is really heavy, so to get everything, to get an overview, what you need. So you have like, to get everything together, we have our brand, we have our music, we have our catalog, and then we have our services to get the music out of the market and collect the money. And one interesting thing, what I've seen in the last weeks, last month in the industry is what is better, like to focus on quantity or quality? Because I see a lot of labels, they put out music to have like a big catalog and selling tracks and earning money. But the quality losing a lot in the last weeks. So I would like to earn money, but I need a lot of tracks out there. So
I think it all goes down to what Dom said earlier, being passionate about what you release. If you can make sure you're passionate about 2 releases a week to come out, go ahead. But like the more releases you put out or the more regular you put releases out, the more work you're gonna have to do. That's just something you have to keep in mind. I don't think it makes sense to like flood the market, which is already so busy with releases every week, doing like 1 release a week. I think that's too much, but if you've got such a good access to artists and they like flooding you with good music, like high quality music, that's fine. But I think there's something in between. Like you shouldn't just release a record every 6 months, because then like your brand won't be recognized enough. But I would say like from our learnings, we had like 1 release a month. It can be a little bit more if you've got a strong team that is working on that. I think now with the Distributor releases, you've got like bi-weekly, right? So that's pretty much the max I would do. And then like fill it up with like compilations here and there. Do also like back catalog compilations and stuff like that. But like new music, I wouldn't release more than like bi-weekly.
yeah. And is there something out there to push the sales? So we have like platforms like Beatport, iTunes, Apple Music, like Amazon Music, where you sell your tracks. And is there an opportunity to push the sales, so like to get into charts and yeah?
Yeah, I mean, that's where you speak to your distributor. So we have like a sales and A&R team. So you can pitch your records to us, and then we'll then go off to the various stores and pitch those records. And we'll obviously talk with you. So if you've got a big campaign or a big release, you know, we can look at what's your focus territory, or what we think might be the best store to focus on. Another thing as well, I think, is always, like for example, like Spotify, they're constantly releasing new features. It's good to be aware of like what they're up to. You know, like they're sort of, everyone's kind of getting into DJ mixes again at the moment. So Spotify have just like launched the first round of DJ mixes. Apple Music have been doing it for years, but they've been pushing more and more. So it's like it's just being aware of like what the stores are up to and what new things they're doing, and like social media, like even like social media now, like Facebook and Instagram all monetize music now. So we deliver to all those platforms, and it's just working out looking at your statements and going, oh, you know, like Spotify's on #1 store, but often you find there'll be like territories or stores that you didn't realise were that big for you, and actually you go, oh, well, maybe we should focus our marketing or advertising budget in that territory because we've obviously got some kind of fan base there. But again, let's sort of say like you should speak to your distributors, and they're there to help advise with things like that, and point you in the right direction, especially when you're new and you're just trying to understand it.
And yeah, like we have like platforms like Spotify, and to be honest, it's quite hard to earn money from Spotify. But which platform is like the main platform where we can say I focus on sales? And for me, in Spotify is like to have a platform where you promote your artist, and you see, okay, all your label all your tracks on the label have like 50,000 plays, so other artists see the labels, okay, nice, they do great promotion, my track is in this playlist, and so this is like a promotional tool for your own record label. Spotify, in my opinion, you don't earn so much money from that, so I focus on platforms like Beatport, Traxsource, or something like that. And do you have something in your mind like about this?
I mean, in terms of, they're very different things. So Beatport's very short-term, like revenue, because it's downloads. So DJs are buying the track to DJ out. So initially you'll see more revenue, whereas streaming's more of a long game, because it's people, if they engage with the record, add it to their own personal collections, they'll keep streaming that for years. People don't tend to remove records from playlists, especially their own personal playlists or collections. So you've got to think it's more of a long-term revenue. That's why it becomes about building catalogue, because if people really invest in your music and your label, they'll be streaming your records for 10, 15 years, and you'll keep seeing revenue. Whereas Beatport's more of like an impact. The release is out, there's loads of hype, everyone's playing it in clubs, and you get that initial income. But Spotify's or streaming in general is more of a long-term game.
Do you have? Can you say some numbers? Like you need to have like 50 releases out there to create a money flow, cash flow. Is there something we can, have in
Pretty
mind?
much depends on how big the single releases were. I mean, for us, it was like we were at release number 50 after 5 years, so we had roughly 10 releases a year. And that was a point where you could see there's like a stable income flowing in where you can create a living. I mean, we weren't at a point where we could like hire 5 people and run the label from there. But that's a point where we saw it was coming to a very stable point where you can start investing and working with like more professional services and everything.
And how long does it take, like, for Defected to have like? And I don't know if you know that, but how long does it take to have an income flow to hire people? But in case
it really, really varies, because it obviously ultimately depends on if you. Often it takes like a record or a few records to just explode, and once you start going into like the bigger downloads or the bigger streaming units, then that's what you need. So often it's that one record that will just elevate the label. And that's what you often see with so many labels, is something connects, goes mainstream or just blows up, and that's what will then change the label. Because once you've then got more revenue coming in, you can then reinvest in the label with advertising and things like that. But often, with most labels, there'll be that deciding that turning point with one record.
And it's nothing you can really plan or like do that in advance. It's the same with us. I can just agree on that. We've got like 3 or 4 tracks that are making like 70% of the income for the same Bristol. But that's not like tracks when we signed them, we thought that's going to be the next big thing. It just happened. And now they are, of course, it's fine that you've got these records that are working well. But yeah, it's often like a lucky shot as well.
And do you have an advice? You can give us an advice how to push tracks. Is it good to push tracks in your record label? So maybe I buy Beatport hype or buy plays, buy clicks. What is your opinion about that? Like, buy services, or is it better to choose like a PR company? They do the stuff for you, or?
I mean, always go down the sort of the more organic route. I would never advise to like pay for people to buy your records. Pay for plays and stuff like that. It never works long term. It'll have a negative effect on the long term. But Beatport Hype is like a sort of a new service for new labels, so they get put into a different chart section. That's quite a cool service. It's really helped a lot of our labels, our small labels, just get a bit more notice on their store. Using PR companies, you know, there's a lot of good ones out there. Obviously, it just comes with a cost, and it's just whether how much you can invest in a label. But and sometimes you don't initially see that initial return. And this is what we say to labels when they're using PR companies. Sometimes you need to use them 2-3 releases, and then you start to see sort of the benefits and the rewards come back from that, because artists do look at stuff like that and go, oh, they're obviously investing in the label, and they sort of start to pay a bit more attention to the record. So, yeah.
We have a question.
Yes.
One moment. Yeah.
Thanks. Hey, I'm Ravi. First, thank you very much for your very interesting insights. I have an add-on question to that. If you don't know if you make money from the release, how do you budget? And do you have any advice on how you would budget the cost for a release?
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard question, because, you know, we've seen it on both sides, where we've had labels budget and you know, they've really believed in the record, and they've spent a lot on promo, advertising, and then it's just not connected. And then we've seen the other side to that, where they've not spent a penny, and it's just, you know, gone number one on Beatport, just to connect for whatever reason. I mean, on average, for like club promo, if you use an external company, it's anywhere from sort of 500 to 1,000 euros. When you start getting radio, if they're doing really direct radio pitching, you're looking closer to 1,000 plus. And then when you bring press into that as well, you know, that gets even more. You're looking probably 1,500 euros plus, really. But yeah, anywhere for basic club promos, about 500 euros in general. And they're with good companies, you know. Like there's like what we do is we have a lot of deals with a lot of PR companies, so we get really good discounts. So what we often do is we offer to our labels, we'll upfront like a campaign for them, but then we'll get like 50% discount with like some of these PR companies, and we pass that saving on to our labels, because we're all about the independent sector. So whatever we can do to help labels grow without spending, because we you know, when you start a label, that money's coming out of your own pocket, so it's hard to find that money. So yeah, we'll always try and help with stuff like that.
Yeah, I would also suggest like building relationships to like press people and stuff as well, because like, we've spent quite a lot of money that didn't really pay back at all. Like we've had releases that we really believed in because we thought they could work in the radio as well. There was one release where we spent like, I think 4K on recreating the sample they used because we couldn't get it cleared. It didn't pay back until today, so you can't really plan it. But yeah, the numbers Dom mentioned are pretty much what works. And if you see like, you can try it without spending 500 or 1,000, just by hitting up the 2 contacts you've made, like on big music blogs or whatever, that could work already. That could already be the point where the record starts making money. And then you've got the budget for the next one. But we've never gone beyond, I would say, $1,000 per release for like budgeting a release.
There's some really good services as well where you can do it. So for press in particular, there's a platform called Submit Hub, and you just buy credits, and then you can pick the outlets you want to pitch to, and then I think they've got, I can't remember how, I don't know if they changed, but they get so long to respond. If they don't respond, you get the credits back, or you get some of the money back. But obviously you have to put all the work in on that, but if you've got the time, and it's a cheaper way to do it, especially for press.
Yeah, I think this was a good first question, so we can open up the Q&A section.
Yeah.
I think so.
I actually have 2 questions. One is, so I run an electronic music school, and we're thinking of starting a label for some of the like promising students. But the challenge is that everyone has a different style and genre. So any tips on having a record label that puts on different genres?
A few years ago, it was quite, sometimes having a label that released multi-genre didn't always work, but to be honest, in this current climate, having a multi-genre label it's quite normal now actually, and because obviously it has gone more streaming focused, the actual spotlight's not on the label, it's on the artist. You don't really see what record label that music's been released on the streaming stores, so you can actually be multi-genre now, and actually then it can sometimes help you then decide on a sound to really to go into more, you know. So we're seeing a lot more labels doing multi-genre stuff, and it's absolutely fine. Even on Beatport, like Beatport will support labels, and you might have releasing house one week and techno the week after, and then, you know, hard dance the week after that, and they will support it as long as it's good music. So.
Okay, thanks. And then the follow-up question was, well, it's separate, but does the artist also own part of the master, or does the record label always own the full master recording?
We do both.
Yeah.
It depends on the deal.
Yeah.
Generally, with a contract, so you'll sign like the master rights for a term. So you in an artist contract, it'll be like a 10-year term. So the record label owns the master rights for like 10 years, and then after that they give them back to the artist. Sometimes we always advise artists to have a term on it, so because some labels used to, there was a phase where everyone was sort of doing it in perpetuity, so it was forever, and that's not the best thing to. I mean, you've probably seen stuff on music news blogs where artists now, you know, they're trying to all get the rights back, where they've signed these deals many years ago and they will never get the rights back. So generally the label owns it for a period of time, and then it will revert back.
Especially when you like plan to invest money in the label, it always makes sense to have more control of the masters, to like do sub-licensing. That's another thing that came up with like running the same Bristol. Like, the more releases we had, the more sub-licensing opportunities we got from like bigger labels like Tool Room, or we did one for Fabric and stuff like that. That makes sense. So the more control you have over the masters over a fair period of time, yeah, I would say 5 to 10 years. That's the period I would do on all records, but not longer than that.
No, I agree.
Any further questions? Okay. Thank you. I think we have a great overview about what is possible and what is, how to create a living, how to create earnings, how to create an income from a record label. And thank you for all suggestions, and
Yeah, you can put our emails in the group or whatever you have to organize it. If
Yeah.
someone comes up with a question later on, feel free to shoot it over. I've got a couple of records to give away if someone's still collecting vinyl. We've got one from our key artist. That's why I said like it's good to focus on one artist. Kyle Watson is a South African artist that we worked really hard with over the last years.
Bring it back to Canada, that's all right?
Yeah, of course.
okay, yeah. Thank you very much for your time, and I enjoyed it a lot.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.